Hey, LinkedIn, and welcome to Business Unusual. This is a live show where we are talking about the way coronavirus is impacting the way we are all working and living and getting through each day. I am Susie Jackson. I am a news editor at LinkedIn, coming to you live from my home in New York City. As we talk through the show today, I want to hear from you. Drop your comments in the stream. Tell us how you're doing. Tell us what you're seeing on the ground wherever you are. If you post to LinkedIn, use the hashtag Business Unusual. You are a big part of the show. I'm going to be checking the stream and calling out to you. So let us know, hello, where are you? Where are you coming to us from today? On the show today, we are going to be talking about nonprofits. Nearly 12.5 million Americans work in the nonprofit sector. If you look at it as a sector, it's the third largest employer in the nation. In 2016, the nonprofit sector was 10% of the private workforce in the US. So we've been talking a lot in the show about small business, about frontline workers and the impact that this virus is having across the spectrum of the globe. But today we really wanted to focus on the nonprofit industry because there's a lot of people there who are trying to help us even in the best of times. And now that it's maybe closer to the worst of times, these businesses are in crisis as well. From health services to food pantries to community spaces, these businesses rely heavily on donations, on volunteers. It is a hard time to ask people for money. A lot of people are out of work. There's a lot of uncertainty going on, but that doesn't mean that the rent stops coming due, that you stop paying your employees, that even if you can't provide physical services right now, there's still overhead for those businesses to go on. There are short-term and long-term implications here. I mean, short-term, so you think of something like a food pantry that is potentially seeing increased demand because of the uncertainty with everyone's jobs and food insecurity, et cetera. How is an organization like that responding when they also need income to keep operating and it's a tough time to ask people for money? We are going to be talking about the way COVID-19 is affecting organizations like that throughout the show today. In a few minutes, we're going to bring on a couple of wonderful guests. We're going to hear from Joan Gary. She is a consultant for nonprofits. She was the executive director of GLAAD for nearly a decade. She does a lot of blogging about the nonprofit space. She's a real advocate in the area and has a consortium of about 3,000 different nonprofits from around the world, bringing their leadership into the fold and trying to learn from one another. We will also be hearing from Melissa Lamont, who is at the Naples Therapeutic Riding Center. That is a nonprofit in Naples, Florida, that pairs people from age 4 to age 84 with therapeutic riding with horses. We're actually going to be joined by one of her horses today named Red. I'm really looking forward to bringing our first horse onto Business Unusual later in the broadcast. We saw a $2 trillion stimulus package enacted last week that does provide some relief for nonprofits, but leaders in the nonprofit sector say it's not nearly enough and that it leaves many smaller nonprofits in grave danger. A lot of that money is for organizations with 500 employees and above. There are a lot of smaller nonprofits that don't cross that bar who are at risk now of and needing more funding. I'm seeing over in the stream right now, we have Matthew, Alejandro, and June joining us. Hello, thank you so much for being with us. Maybe you work at a nonprofit, maybe you are a regular donator to nonprofits or volunteer. We would love to hear about your experiences as we talk in the show today. Tell us in the comments, what are you seeing? What are you dealing with? What questions are you grappling with? I just mentioned a moment ago that a lot of nonprofit leaders are calling for more action. They are actually pushing a bipartisan bill that would provide $60 billion to nonprofits. They see it as a way to shore up a bill that was hastily put together, that other stimulus package last week. With regard to that, we have a comment on LinkedIn from Neil. He is in communications at the United Way, and he echoes the sentiment of some people in his leadership and of leadership of many nonprofits, saying a federal stimulus package for nonprofits would go a long way towards helping, in his case, the United Way, the YMCA, and other orgs who are continuing to serve their communities. So we mentioned an example of food pantries, but there's also other services that, say, the YMCA provides, like job coaching or help with resumes, et cetera. There are a lot of services that are going to be in need right now, but also that are going to be in need as this crisis continues to unfold, as the economic impacts of it continue to reverberate. So keep in mind all these different nonprofits, and they help in ways large and small, in ways obvious and not. And it's really a time where we need help. So I want to look at some of these what these nonprofit folks are saying on LinkedIn. We have had people coming to the platform to express dismay, to express positivity, to talk about what they are doing and trying. The first comment that we're going to pull up is from Mike. He uses a technical term here. He says these times are uber bonkers. And as everyone in advancement tries to figure out what's going on, he says it's important to just do the best thing you can do right now. If we were able to pull in the photo that Mike had shared too, we don't quite have room to show it on the screen. It's a picture of Grandpa Bee from Frozen 2, who talks about doing the next best right thing that you can do when you're not sure about what to do next. So Mike reminds us to be human and acknowledge the insecurity of this time. He says to offer ways for donors to help if they want to be involved, or just be there to listen if they need you to listen. The next comment I'd like to look at is from Drew. Drew runs a nonprofit and says that he had a call with some donors who he considers family. These are regular contributors. They're people that Drew and his organization have a relationship with. He talks about being on an hour-long call with them, not to specifically ask for help, but just to share what they were doing as an organization. I think that's a point that we're going to hear my guest Joan echo in a few minutes. Just stay in touch with these people, let them know what you're doing, kind of remind them that the work continues, even if some of the services are suspended or operating differently. Chelsea also comes to LinkedIn to talk about some of the creative new ways that different nonprofits are figuring out to work through this moment, and then also to look to the future. She talks about the Race for Autism being a virtual event this year. It's a big fundraiser for her organization. So you can't have a race in person right now, but they somehow put on a virtual event to still try and spark some community and have an activity around which the community could gather and they could raise some badly needed funds. I'm looking over at the stream now, and we have Linda. Hello, Linda. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. I'm not sure where you're coming from, but Linda tells us she's a volunteer in recruitment, and she's focusing on building relationships and listening to potential volunteers. And I'm so glad you bring that point up, Linda, because we're going to, in the show today, get to some ideas that we have for how you can volunteer, or for what kind of volunteer services might be available when you're at a time where physical volunteering might not be appropriate. And speaking of that, the last comment I wanted to bring up was from Gerard, who is volunteering. He started volunteering just now. He started volunteering 1 day a week, delivering baby bundles to new moms. And by the word mums, I think that Gerard is in the UK. So it's really great to see that there are people who are getting out to help, maybe in ways that they haven't before. Maybe they hadn't considered volunteering before. We're going to be hearing about different ways that you can volunteer, even if you're not able to physically go somewhere or do something. And to look more at that volunteering aspect, to look more at what nonprofits are facing and the creative ways in which that they should be trying to experiment to get through this, I wanted to bring in my first guest. Joan Gary, welcome.
Hey, Susie, how are you?
I'm great. Joan, you are a consultant for nonprofits. You were the executive director of GLAAD for nearly a decade. And I know that you also run the Nonprofit Leadership Lab, which is a consortium of thousands of smaller nonprofits at a leadership level. Can you just tell us, what is the state of things right now? What are you hearing from the leaders that you convene? What are you seeing happening in the space?
So it was actually, I loved hearing what you put up on the screen from varying LinkedIn folks like Drew and Chelsea. There's sort of two sides to the coin here, right? Is that you've got some struggling folks. You've got a lot of people who are struggling with increased need for their services. And I think you made some very good points around that in your opening. On the flip side, I don't think we should lose sight for a single minute about what remarkable things are happening in the nonprofit sector. Michael Hyatt, the leadership consultant, talks about when there are challenges, what is it that those challenges make possible? I think nonprofit leaders are really leaning in and stepping in on that. And I often think about this because I do a lot of leadership consulting work, that the DNA of a nonprofit leader is that they're fiercely empathetic, they're deeply passionate, and they're creative problem solvers. I want you to think about those three for a second and think to yourself, wouldn't you give your eye teeth for each one of the leaders of our country and the leaders in our society to be dripping with those three things? And so I think there's a lot of hope and inspiration to take from the nonprofit sector right at this moment, that leaders should be owning that sense of passion, owning that sense of, I am a creative problem solver, and that's what drew me into this work to begin with. And how do I take those kind of superpowers and turn them inward to maximize the visibility, the impact, and the resources of my organization?
That's great. And let's talk about, if they're taking that creativity and turning it inward to then turn it outward, what are they facing? Talk to me about the traditional sources of funding for nonprofits. I think most of us have a sense, but you're an expert in the area. I want to hear just how reliant are these organizations on, are they on donations and volunteerism? What are the threats to that structure, and how should leaders be responding?
So the vast majority of funding for nonprofits comes from individual donations, you and me, and what checks we plop down to an organization we care deeply about. A great deal of funding comes from foundations as well, who have specific areas of focus, and they identify organizations in those sectors and support them with grants. Some organizations receive government funding, but not all of them do. So if you are an advocacy organization and you're advocating for the rights of LGBTQ people, you're not going to be seeing government money. And then associated with individual giving is also Gala Revenue. And nonprofits, especially small ones, are deeply and overly dependent on revenue from fundraising galas. And this is a place where small nonprofits are taking big hits. Spring is gala season, the season of the rubber chicken dinner. And you've got events that just simply aren't happening, and they are causing a tremendous amount of vulnerability in the space. The other piece is that you raise money when you're doing the work. Makes sense, right? So, let's assume for argument's sake that you're running an organization that provides direct service, but you actually can't provide direct service to those clients because they need to stay home. Mm-hmm. So that also that thwarts your ability to continue to fire the flames of funding in that situation as well.
Yeah, I have a comment from the stream here from Harper. It's a question, actually. I think it's a question for you. She says that she works for Habitat for Humanity in St. Louis.
Yep.
All of their revenue streams are crippled. Corporate donations have halted. Individual donors are holding donations. Events are canceled, like you're saying, a lot of gala events in the spring season done. Their reserves are shut down. Their volunteers are not on site. She wants to know, how can we diversify when all of our arms are tied behind our backs?
So I think that this, and I sort of think about this not just in terms of the sector, but also in terms of kind of my life, which is that we're at a period of time in which we might have to sort of shrink a bit in order to set ourselves up to recover. And not everybody is going to be in a position to be able to ask right now. It is very difficult to cut through the clutter of all that is going on. Frankly, people's own personal terror is taking up an awful lot of emotional bandwidth, and it's making it really hard for nonprofits to cut through and get people to care about the issues that really matter in our society. So in a place like Habitat, if I could just drive to some of the pieces of advice that I've been offering nonprofit clients of all shapes and sizes. And please know that it doesn't matter how many zeros you have on the end of your budget, that these problems are very, very, very much universal. You have got to be out there. You've got to be out there stoking the mission of your organization. Your organization's mission is no less important today than it was 2 months ago. And I'm hearing way too many nonprofit leaders who are saying things like, we only provide beautiful orchestral music to our community, or we only do children's theater. First things first, get rid of the only. All of that is important. So get out there and unapologetically talk about your organization and what it is doing that continues to be important. People continue to live with disabilities. They continue to live with autism. They continue to be homeless at greater and greater rates. We need to know that there are people on the front lines doing that work. So get that word out. The second thing is that you can be doing at Habitat is really nurturing the people who are close to you. This is probably the single biggest piece of advice I can offer you, is that everyone, your board, your staff, need to be on the phones, talking to the people who are close to the action, your volunteers, your donors. How are you doing? And while you're on the phone, you can talk about some of the challenges. You can talk about some of the creativity that you have injected into the work that you're doing. And also, while you are not able to do the work, is there sort of the equivalent of an organizational closet decluttering? We've decluttered about 5 closets here in our home. What is it that you can be doing that this space makes possible?
Yeah. Speaking of closet decluttering, we actually have Dress for Success joining us on the stream. So hello.
Nice.
Yeah, I want to say hi to a few other organizations who are joining us. We have another United Way branch. We have Suicide Awareness Voices of Education. We have the Alzheimer's Association. We have Be the Match, the National Marrow Donor Program.
Fantastic.
Thank you for joining us. Bridget is joining us in the stream from a nonprofit in New Jersey, echoing what Drew said earlier in the comment about, and Joan, what you're saying too, about keeping in touch and asking how people are doing during this time. She says that they are able to really develop relationships with their network and mobilize people into giving back to the community just by doing that little check-in. How are we doing?
It's a quick story. So Amy Graves, who's a member of our nonprofit leadership lab, runs the Brooklyn Children's Theater. She calls to check in on one of her donors, simply a check-in. How are you and your family doing? In the course of the conversation, the guy asks her what's going on with the Children's Theater. She's able to tell them that they've moved to this sort of format where they're doing movie musicals with the kids. And the kids are actually kind of pumped up about it, and they're rehearsing via Zoom. The guy says, I really want to help. I understand you're struggling. Call me tomorrow. Of course, that's the first call Amy makes the next day. And the guy says, I'd like to give you another $50,000 gift to get you over the hump. So nurturing is actually not something nonprofits are good enough at on best of days. So I think about this. They're not good enough at thinking about creative ways to engage volunteers. They have to be a lot better at stewarding and nurturing their donors. They've got to get less dependent on galas. And there are 3 ways that if this pandemic forces the nonprofit sector to look at those 3 things differently, that will be a silver lining in a very dark set of clouds.
That's great. We have Fran on the stream with an enthusiastic all caps yes. She says, yes, our mission does not stop with the virus. Being from the American Cancer Society, many of our constituents are among the high risk. So
yes.
It's really important to find ways to connect and align with donors, volunteers, and community. She says, thank you for affirming this. We have a question from the stream from Tori. Joan, I'm interested in what you're seeing across the leadership lab. Are most nonprofits doing hiring freezes right now? What are you seeing?
It depends. I think the smaller organizations, we're seeing some furloughs, we're seeing hiring freezes, we're seeing some layoffs, right? If you're not actually able to provide the services, you got to figure out a way to keep the lights on. So yes, we're seeing some of that. And please remember, nonprofit leaders tend to be, they tend to have pleaser personalities. They're accustomed to fixing things. They don't like to deliver bad news. But please know that Brene Brown talks about clear being kind. If you're in this position where you're going to have to actually shrink in order to expand, remember that you're doing that in the service of the long-term sustainability of your organization. And that people are going to really understand that. And that goes to another point I just want to make sure that I toss in here, Susie, which is if you have to ask now, right? And there are some folks that are really in dire circumstances. No, how am I going to make the next payroll? You don't want to come from a place of pleading. You don't want to come from a place of scarcity. What you want to be able to do is to say, I plan to be an organization that's around for a long time. I plan to recover. And when we do, the need for our services is actually going to be greater. That we have learned a lot during this period of time that will make our service delivery even smarter and more effective. And I want to get to that place after recovery. And I need your support now to get me to that place. Paint a picture of that place and ask your donor to help you bridge to that place. That's the kind of framing that's really going to ignite a donor in the kind of way that will make them say, I want to help.
Joan, you're making me think I can get to that place, and I don't even work for a nonprofit. Nina is in this.
But you know what? You don't have to work for a nonprofit, Susie. You can be a checkbook activist, right? You can say, okay, how could I take $25 and make it count? So I'll give you an example. There's a great organization in Seattle called Gifted Wishes, run by this rock star woman named Jean Rosenbaum. All they do, think Make-A-Wish, except it's small, community-based, and all about local hospice. For like $100, you can donate to Gifted Wishes. And in one case, I'll give you an example of a wish. A guy who's dying, wanted to go out to the nearby mountains to have a picnic lunch at the location where he had spread his parents' ashes. That's all it took, $100, right? So every small nonprofit that is the backbone of our community, that are the people that are actually working their asses off to build a civil society we all aspire to, it doesn't take much to make a difference.
That is really inspiring, and that's beautiful and simple and pretty cost effective.
Right?
Even if you just have a little bit and you want to do something with it, I think it's a great chance to talk about what are things that people can be doing. Like me, I'm not at a nonprofit, but you gave me this great example. We saw earlier a guy in the comments starting to volunteer day one this week.
Right.
What can people do if they can't physically get there? What are creative ways they should be thinking about if their favorite nonprofit maybe isn't set up to receive that kind of help yet? How can they kind of push in there anyway?
So let's first of all, if you're a nonprofit leader, do not assume that people are going to say no. There are organizations like the one that we just mentioned that are, in fact, having volunteers come in every day. Tony's Kitchen, right here in Montclair, New Jersey, which is where I'm located. They have people and they're protecting them. They're following all the CDC guidelines, and they're making sure that the homeless folks who need their food and their lunches are getting them. God's Love We Deliver, a large New York City-based organization that makes sure that folks who can't get out of the house because of chronic illness are getting nutritious meals. Those kitchens are filled with people slicing and dicing. So don't assume people are going to say, don't assume that volunteers are going to say no. The second thing is, think about how you can, as a nonprofit leader, think about how you can engage people differently. So my favorite recent story comes out of Princeton, New Jersey, the Princeton Senior Resource Center. Drew Dyson runs this place. And right, the seniors are the most vulnerable population. They're not coming to his center. He offers something called the Evergreen Forum. He gets instructors and professors from the area that teach high-level enrichment classes that are well attended, but not now. So what he did was he found a group of volunteers, young volunteers. Remember, we've got college students and high school students who have a precious commodity that you need, which is time. So he went out and he looked for tech volunteers who started to work with seniors on how to get onto Zoom. Now, I don't know how many of you have aging parents, but this is no small feat, right? Try to get your aging mother to get onto your Kindle, and you'll want a martini too, right? So what he does,
I've been doing that this week as well with my parents. We have to call them on the phone first to get them set up to call them on the screen.
Totally. So what they did was they worked with hundreds of these seniors to get them set up on Zoom. And before, how many online classes, how many people in the Princeton Senior Resource Center took online classes? Zero. How many are taking them now? Over close to 400. What's the secret recipe and the sauce in here? The seniors, he's going to be able to reach more seniors who aren't physically able to go to the center. Secondly, he actually made a number of volunteers who have technical expertise feel like $1 million because they were able to help these seniors get these classes. So what kind of skills and expertise do you offer that might be really helpful? Let's say let's use Tony's Kitchen for a moment here in Montclair. Maybe they've long needed a one sheet that they could use to market their, to sort of make sure that more and more people know about their services. Call them, say, hey, I know how to do graphic design, right? Now, you might have a hard time getting them to call you back because they're kind of busy. But I think this is also a time when it's incumbent upon nonprofit leaders to sit down and take a few minutes and say, okay, what skills and expertise could we really use right now? And could we tap into the college market? Could we tap into the high school market? Could we tap into the boomer market, who are people who are sitting at home just like me, and get them thinking about the fact that they could have a role to play in moving my work forward at a time when I need it to move forward.
Yeah, it's a great creative way for people on the volunteer side too to think about their skills and what they might have to offer. Maybe you can't leave your house to do something, but you have these graphic design skills, you know how to start a Zoom call, et cetera. There are small things that maybe white collar workers do in their day to day that could actually be enormously helpful if you're thinking in that creative way. And I want to come over to the stream for a moment because Nina is saying creative solutions. I love it. Pivot to survive and thrive. Daniel is saying, Joan, you've got me standing up and clapping in my living room. I think you're helping a lot of people in the stream right now. Jason says that the pivot from in-person events to virtual is hard, but very doable. It
is doable. Somebody I know did a virtual paddle raise instead of their in-person gala. And by the way, if you save me from a rubber chicken dinner, I'll give you money. Right?
Rubber chicken at home.
They did a virtual paddle raise, and they raised 25 of the 35 they would have raised if they'd done it in person, and the in-person stuff would have cost them more money.
Yeah, that is a good silver lining. Jason says organizations should continue to find their light and stand in it. Joan, we have several people who would love you to repeat those three things, Jones, that you said a nonprofit leader should be dripping with, and wouldn't we be grateful if everyone was?
Yes. So we would be. So they are deeply empathetic. They are fiercely passionate, and they are creative problem solvers. Right? Why did they actually become nonprofit leaders? Because they saw a gap and they couldn't sit on their behinds, sit idly by. They had to they were propelled off their chairs to try to fix it. So these are the skills that will get you as a nonprofit leader through the crisis. And these are the kinds of attributes that we all should be emulating, that we should be looking to these folks who are running these nonprofits and saying, these folks are superheroes.
Superheroes. That's a great term. I want to say hello to a few more of these superheroes who are joining us in the stream. We have the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Lynchburg.
Oh, I love them.
Komen Foundation. Hello, Boys and Girls Club Komen. I've done some walks for you. American College of Emergency Physicians and Emergency Medicine Foundation. Important people right now. Susan Meek, Girl Scouts of the Colonial Coast. The National MS Society. Hello. Thank you for joining us. Turning Point Pregnancy Resource Center. Hello. Best Buddies International. Come from Boston. I know that's the Tom Brady charity. So Tom Brady's going to Tampa, but we still love Brady and Best Buddies. And the Boy Scouts of America in the Atlanta Area Council. Thank you so much for joining us. I also want to read one thing in the stream. Rifath is talking about these creative pivots, saying that we provide community and day services to adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities in Skokie, Illinois. That the Douglas Center, their clients are at home, but the sewing department They are planning to manufacture fabric face masks for the community. So, I mean, what a wonderful creative pivot. It's something
just even the list
as well.
Right, even the list of organizations you just that you just rattled off of people who are joining us this afternoon. Let me just say thank you. What would our society be, right, if we didn't have people who stood up, raised their hands, and said, I want to try to fix this problem in our society, right? So, and when you think about what Susie said at the beginning, I just don't think people really realize this, that retail is, right, the number one employer, food is the number two employer, and the nonprofit sector is the third largest employer in this country, ahead of manufacturing. So there are and when you then think about board members and volunteers, like our society is these organizations are the backbone of our society. And we have to figure out a way to support them through this so they come out on the other side smarter, more effective, and more impactful. And I believe that is absolutely what can happen if those nonprofit leaders take those attributes that make them great leaders and put them to work inside their own organizations. And if the greater public gets that, that they can help. There's something really, I want to just say one last thing and then shut me up and bring somebody else on or something. But there are three things that live at the heart of the nonprofit sector: relationships, connection, and meaning. Right? When you think about the Boys and Girls Club of America, or you think about the Girl Scouts, you think about nurturing and building relationships with your neighbor, being a good neighbor, whether that neighbor is next door, whether that neighbor is in Kenya. When you think about relationships, when you think about connecting people to the world around them, and you consider meaning and purpose, this is what we are all right now. We're always hungry for it. But have we ever been more hungry for connection, relationships, and purpose? Like, we have millions of nonprofit leaders out there that are showing us the way.
Yes. It sounds like you might need to go, but I have one more question for you from the stream.
No, I actually don't have to go.
You're giving us some good stuff, Joan.
I'm here at home. I'm kind of stuck.
They want to know, give us maybe your top two pieces of advice for doing these things virtual, a virtual fundraiser, minus the rubber chicken. What should people be doing? You mentioned paddles. And I also have a question about virtual volunteering. What are some things that people can incorporate into their plans?
So first of all, if you had a gala and you had to cancel it, get on the phones, get your board members on the phones, your volunteers on the phones, and tell them that $100 ticket or that $200 ticket was actually going to cost you 35 cents on the dollar. And at this particular time, you can save them a rubber chicken meal, and you can drop all $200 to the bottom line. Ask them to donate the whole ticket. So that's one thing I would recommend. Full stop. Just do that. Secondly, I'm actually thinking a lot about, and I've talked with another fundraising expert named Jim Langley about this. How about virtual salons? Bring your donors, the people that are close to your organization. I talk about this all the time. Keep your tribe close now, so they'll be with you when you recover. But what about a virtual salon where you invite people into a Zoom room and you talk about some of the issues facing the sector as a whole, whether it's immigration or domestic violence, and get people talking about that. Maybe bring in one of your program people to talk about that. So create an opportunity to enrich your stakeholders. And if that leads to some kind of an ask, great. If it doesn't, you will be teed up for sort of post-crisis recovery.
That is a great tip. And that's a way to spark community and give people what they need
Totally.
and fulfill your mission. So that's a great idea. Thank you so much for that, Joan.
Yeah.
Joan, it's been really wonderful talking with you. From looking at the stream, it sounds like you've really helped a lot of people think creatively about this, feel like that they're not in this alone. Thank you for being with us throughout the show today.
I am really happy that you decided that it would be worthwhile to focus an episode on the nonprofit sector. I think people just don't really always think that local homeless shelter, that local DV shelter, right? That these folks provide a backbone for our society, that there are absolutely ways, please, there are absolutely ways as nonprofit leaders that you can do this. You can do this. Paint a picture of what life looks like when you recover. Take your creative problem solving inward. Think about what's possible. And your organizations may, in fact, they may shrink in the short term, but I believe they will be stronger in the long term. And for those of you listening who are not in the sector, please think about how you could make a small contribution or get on the phone and ask an organization in a sector you care a lot about, how can I be helpful? I'm stuck here in my home. Maybe I'm on furlough. Maybe I'm a college student. Maybe I'm a high school student. What can I do? Because in a world that feels so chaotic, where everything feels sort of somehow hopeless, right? Chaotic. People want to feel a sense of meaning and purpose, and nonprofit leaders can deliver that for us. We can partner with them to actually make this period of time not just a hibernate or paralysis period of time, but a time in which we actually legitimately look at what does it mean to be a citizen in our society. And if we do this right, we're going to come out on the other side of this epidemic. People are going to feel a greater sense of generosity, gratitude. They're going to look at the world and realize they're going to hug their neighbors and never, ever take it for granted ever again. And that should make for a kinder, gentler world when we're done.
We are looking forward to a time where we can hug people again. Joan, thank you so much for sharing. It's been really wonderful to have you.
My pleasure.
Okay. That was Joan Gary. She is a consultant for nonprofit. She was the executive director of GLAD for almost a decade. I am Susie Jackson. This is Business Unusual. It is LinkedIn's live show where we talk about the way coronavirus is impacting the way we work. Today, we are talking about the nonprofit sector. It is a tough time for everyone, especially if you're in a position where you're used to relying on donations and volunteerism and the kindness of people giving to you. And it's a hard time to ask for things. It's a hard time to be making your way through, maybe on low cash reserves, et cetera. Joan was just talking to us about leaders getting creative, changing the way they think about how to execute their mission. In the stream, we have Mary that says, she's saying, thank you for this great info. She tells us that her organization is now reaching audiences through podcasting, not something that they thought that they'd be doing, but now they have the time to figure it out. I want to say hello to another nonprofit joining us, the Move for Hunger. And I would also like to say hello to our next guest. This is Melissa Saracino Lamont. She is joining us from the Naples Therapeutic Riding Center in Naples, Florida. And I see you're not by yourself.
Hi, Susie. I'm with Red, my thoroughbred friend here. Hopefully he'll stick around. He's very excited to be part of this live cast.
Welcome, Red. It's lovely to see you this morning. We did talk earlier. It is Red's first live broadcast, so let's everyone make Red feel comfortable. Leave your comments for Red and your questions for Missy in the stream. Missy and Red, we're really happy to have you today. You are a nonprofit. You are on the ground right now dealing with this crisis in real time. Missy, we're going to play a little video as you talk, but I would love to hear about what your organization does outside of this time of COVID-19. What kind of service are you normally providing to your community?
Sure. Naples Therapeutic Riding Center is a center that offers therapeutic riding for individuals with special needs from the ages of 4 years old to 84 years old. We have 14 horses that help us to be able to provide these services. All of the individuals that ride in our program are referred to us from a doctor, and they have a diagnosis to be able to ride with us. And that diagnosis can vary in range of on the autism spectrum to Down syndrome to cerebral palsy, adults with MS or Parkinson's or stroke victims, individuals with anxiety or stress are referred to us. On top of our therapeutic riding, we also have ground-based programs that are more mental health-based, and those are individuals living with addictions or substance abuse problems, those that are grieving the loss of a parent, children that are coming for bereavement programs. We also have emergency shelters and children that are staying at emergency shelters, women at shelters for abuse or neglect are coming and receiving services and working with our horses as well.
These are really important services. I mean, my heart is feeling wrenched just thinking about the situations those people are in and the therapy that working with these animals provides, and knowing that they can't access that right now. What is happening now? What's been going on with your organization, given social distancing, given quarantines and times of stress? I mean, it's a heightened time of stress when you're talking about populations that are already dealing with a certain amount of stress in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, so all of our therapeutic riders really rely on a volunteer to be able to ride with us. And so we have over 350 volunteers that are normally out here helping our program. And the riders rely on them for support, like a training wheel if they're on a bicycle, or a seatbelt if they're in a car. The volunteer is really walking next to them and making sure that they're safe while they're riding. And that relies on a lot of contact. They're actually touching the riders. They are helping them hand over hand, giving direction with reins. And that was not possible. So we had to stop all of our volunteers from coming. That's over 350, telling them that they were not able to come onto campus because of the social distancing. And then that meant that we were not able to have any of our participants come to campus either, because they were unable to get on the back of the horse without the support of the volunteers. In addition to that, the volunteers help us with our 14 horses on our campus. They have to be fed and cared for, and they have to be exercised, and their stalls have to be cleaned. So we had to relocate 9 of our horses to be able to maintain the care of them, knowing that our volunteers would not be on our campus to be able to help us with that.
And we've got some people in the stream who are very excited to see you, and especially Red. I have to admit, they're very, very excited to see Red. Ariana says, Red is beautiful. Edward says this is his first live stream with a horse guest. So Edward, it's a first for you and for Red. Christina says, Red, you're beautiful. Sam loves the office background that you have, Missy. So you were talking to us about there's a lot of care that still goes into the livelihood, the life of these horses. They have to be fed and groomed and loved and exercised, and their shoes have to be changed out and cleaned. That work doesn't stop just because the services can't be provided right now. What does that mean for you in terms of funding and donations? This work has to go on. We have actual animals here, and the services now are at risk. What about the future as well? Like, you want to see this program continue through this time.
I think what Joan was talking about a lot, about thinking of the future and what we're going to be like in our next step. We need these horses now to be healthy so that we can reopen when we're able to, and when we all get through this. And in order to be able to reopen and have the horses, they need to be cared for now. So yeah, it is a lousy time to be asking people for support, for funding, to be able to continue to be able to donate to us. But without these horses being cared for now, we will be unable to do that in the future. And that's really the message that we're trying to talk to about with our donors and the people that help us through fundraising.
And what are some of the things that you're talking to your regular donors about? What are some of the ways that you're trying to be creative and figure things out in the short term, and maybe even thinking about the long term if you've been able to?
Sure. So we had an event plan, and Joan was talking about small nonprofits really relying heavily on events. And we are one of those small nonprofits that relies heavily on fundraising events. They're not rubber chicken fundraising events. They're usually involving our horses. And this was a Kentucky Derby event that we had planned for May. Knowing that that was going to be canceled and we won't be able to reschedule it, I reached out to everyone that had already purchased tickets and everyone that had come in the past to this event, letting them know that unfortunately it was going to be canceled. And there was one donor that is a friend of our organization, a longtime friend of all of our horses here and of NTRC. And she sent in a check that she would have given based off what she gave last year. And she asked me to use this as an example to other donors. She doesn't give because the event is fun, although they are. She gives because she believes in what we do. And it's the right thing to do. And she asked me to make sure that I shared that with all of our other donors, that if you are able to give at this time, think of what you had already planned on giving when you were coming to the event and still give that. Not because the event is canceled and you're not going to give, but because you think it's still the right thing to do. And on top of that, we received a grant. It was actually a few months ago, but I'm using it now as an opportunity to leverage some donors in an interest. It's a matching grant. So any new donations that we receive now up until October of this year, this foundation will match up to $50,000. So this is a really good way for us to encourage new donations from new individuals that don't know about us and really leverage their new donation with this matching grant. And that's something that we're fortunate to be able to do. And it is a really good time to be able to do it because more people like the opportunity that their money will be matched by another foundation.
That's great. Those are some great creative solutions. We really wish you the best of luck. Is there anything you want others to know, other people who are running nonprofits, other people who may already be really involved with a nonprofit or would like to be? Just what's a parting word of wisdom?
It's important to realize that people still want to give. People still want to help nonprofits, that nonprofits will be here when this pandemic is over, and not to lose hope, and to just be present and be there for your staff, be there for your volunteers, remember your donors, and reach out to them, call them, think of the best ways to stay in contact with them. It's not just that email anymore. It's picking up the phone and making sure that they're doing okay is really important. I think it's taking in all of the chaos, but then being strong and staying calm and projecting as much hope as possible to your staff and to your volunteers that you'll be here when this is done, and that we're still here now.
Thank you so much, Missy. Thank you, Red. You did great, Red. I thought Red was a little nervous before the show, but no jitters. Really great. Really calm. Wonderful. You're going to be a star. Missy and Red, thank you so much for joining us today and for all of that help giving up everyone on the screen. That was Missy Lamont from the Naples Therapeutic Riding Center in Red in Naples, Florida. And I want to say hello to a few more people in the stream before we're getting ready to wrap up here today. Move for Hunger, thank you for joining us. Make-A-Wish Ohio, welcome, hello. Hope Project International and the Sold Out Youth Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you've gotten some good tips, some strategies to apply to your nonprofit, or if you're on the volunteer side or would like to be, that you've gotten some new ideas about ways that you can reach out and help your community, which is going to feel good for you. It's going to be good for your community in the short term and in the long term too. I'm Susie Jackson. This has been Business Unusual, LinkedIn's live show where we talk about the way coronavirus is impacting the way we work. We come to you live from the LinkedIn editors page Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at noon. We'll see you again on Tuesday when my colleague Caroline Fairchild will be hosting. So I hope you tune in then. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe out there.